Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn. I've received several requests over the past couple days to do a response video to a couple of videos that were put up by a couple of different users, one being TJ the Amazing Atheist, the other being Federalist Films. This video is not a response to either of those videos, and I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to be responding to those videos in just a second. But first, let me state my situation regarding these two individual users for everybody's general information. Federalist Films has been blocked from my channel. During the little run-in that I had with the Skeptical Heretic several weeks back, he took it upon himself to come on to one of the three videos in question, load it up with comments to the point that there was nothing on the front page except for his comments. A lot of it laced with personal insults, and I came to the inevitable conclusion that he was not worth my time and his comments were not worth the space that they were taking up, so they were removed and he was out of here. And soon after getting rid of him and switching the status on those videos, I investigated him, and my judgment concerning his worthiness for further conversation was proven right. The guy is an exemplary example. Let me just put this more plainly, that's not the best term to use. He is a classic example of cognitive dissonance, a person who believes one thing and yet does the exact opposite. This is a person who has abstract beliefs, but no concrete implementation for those beliefs. He thinks that we shouldn't spend ourselves into oblivion, but he doesn't support candidates who would reverse this trend. He doesn't think we should be at war with other countries unless it's absolutely necessary. He votes for people that love war and get involved in it like crazy, whether it be Barry or one of the other Democrats or one of the so-called moderate Republicans. This is my assessment of his general outlook. I have been informed by a couple of third parties that he is a student of the Nixonian school of realistic politics or political realism. There is one thing that I think is more anti-intellectual than neoconservatism, and that's Nixonian politics. Bear in mind, Nixonian politics is what gave us the war on drugs. Does Federalist Films think that the war on drugs is a good thing? Probably not, according to what I've seen of his video content, but he identifies himself with that school of thought, even though the war on drugs is a clear consequence of that mode of thought. Same thing with the wars. Nixon, for all of his talk about containment over military involvement, he contributed much to the Vietnam War before finally working us into an exit strategy a good 5 or 6 years into his presidency. Nixonian thought is an establishment viewpoint, and it's one with a lot of very glaring inconsistencies. And on top of that, Federalist Films is an arrogant jackass. And I don't have time for somebody like that. It's the same thing with the Skeptical Heretic, who also got blocked from my channel. These people talk because they love hearing themselves talk. They don't talk because they want to discuss something. There's only one person in the conversation that's worth hearing, and that's themselves. So I'm content to let them talk to themselves. So I'm not going to be writing a response video to Federalist Films. He's not worth it. His audience is not worth it. And he also happens to be a strong adherent to the atheist cult that Fringe Elements alluded to earlier. In fact, I have on many different occasions seen Federalist Films kissing TJ's ass with all of these fits of lavish praise that I don't really want to repeat. Whenever anybody praises TJ, I cringe and I can feel my skin crawl. There's nothing there to praise, which leads me to the Amazing Atheist. I couldn't get through all of Federalist Films' critique of Ron Paul because it was so pig-headed it hurt. TJ's critique of Ron Paul was so brazen and so idiotic and so whiny that I was actually able to suffer through it, because this is the classic The Amazing Atheist that I remember from 4 years ago. The same guy who had a conniption fit because he found out, oh my gosh, Ron Paul is a Christian and he actually believes this crap. I actually believe that crap too. And everybody here who watches my videos knows it. Many of them are atheists, and they don't blow a gasket whenever I tell them that. They disagree with me on it, but they have a sense of priorities, and their priorities tell them that living in a free and civil society is preferable to wanting up each other on one particular pet issue. I like all of my atheist subscribers. I regularly interact with them. I talk with them. We don't talk about religion, but we talk about just about everything else. And sometimes religion does come up, and it's not always pretty. But we understand that there are lines that we don't cross. I don't go after them without mercy, to the point that they're alienated and don't want anything to do with me anymore. And the same is true in reverse. TJ, on the other hand, is the mirror opposite of what I stand for and what my atheist subscribers in the market anarchist, libertarian, minarchistic camp, so to speak, believe in. We believe that the individual's liberty should be maximized to the largest extent possible, and that people should voluntarily engage in trade with each other through contracts, and the only real purposeful function of government is as a third-party arbiter. There are different schools of thought. I believe that most of the market anarchists that I'm aware of support more of a market-oriented third-party system where you have checks and balances arising through a common law system. My approach is sort of a middle ground between that and a very loose confederated variation on the anti-federalist version of federalism. It follows the Articles of Confederation, but it's a little bit more organized, and it's a bit more broader reaching. And others are full-blown federalist thinkers. I think that's more along the lines of what Eagle Eye 1975 believes. He's a strict Lockean constitutionalist. But all of us have one belief in common, and that is the belief that nobody is above the law. Nobody can circumvent the law. The law applies to all men, and as an extension, all women also. Nobody gets out of it by being in a seat of authority. The police are not exempt from being subject to the law when they break it. Same goes for anybody in elected office. In the link in the description, there is a video that was written directly in response to TJ's video concerning Ron Paul. And in it, there is a quotation from TJ where he says that he doesn't believe in the concept of individual liberty. He believes that the only thing that is true and the only thing that is legitimate is the state. And by the state, he implies directly the sovereign, unrestrained authority of government. Government can do no wrong because government is government. By its nature, it is there specifically to suppress and to control. In keeping with this, TJ's politics closely reflect this axiomatic viewpoint of liberty. When you believe that the state is the center and the basis of all life, which is what most theocracies believe and what most fascist groups believe, your views on individual issues become much more pronounced and much more unreasonable. And this is where we get into the issue of abortion. A lot of people take pro-choice or pro-life stances for different reasons. But the pro-abortion viewpoint that is etched into the lion's share of the Amazing Atheist rant against Ron Paul is rooted in the idea that there is an inherent right in the state that is granted by the voting majority that certain types of lives are disposable. This isn't a question of saving the life of the mother, which I understand. It's not even a question of the mental health of the mother and getting into the rape and incest thing. These are small percentages of what constitutes current abortion statistics. And even though I don't agree with the second of those two examples, I can understand the argument. I can also understand the argument for post-conception, contraceptives such as the morning after pill and so on and so forth. This is something that, again, I don't agree with. I don't believe in it. But it's distinct in many respects from the general concept of abortion. It is an abortion in the sense that it's a termination of a pregnancy, but we're dealing with something a bit different. For me, just speaking on my understanding of genetics and what accounts for a specific species, the minute that we have a fully formed active DNA strand that is multiplying and forming life, we have life. All life is measured in terms of potential and actual. This is the fallaciousness of TJ's entire argument in this regard. He talks about life in its earliest stages as only being in potential because he conflates potential life with dependency. When the fetus, the zygote, or whichever technical stage that the unborn baby is inside the uterus, it is dependent. It survives only by deriving its nutrition from the mother. Henceforth, it is not viable when taken outside of the womb. However, you take a fully birthed child that is, say, about 10 minutes old, and just lay it out in the street with nobody to care for it, it's just as helpless, and it's ultimately just as unviable in sustaining its own life. The line that's drawn when dealing with the abortion question versus the infanticide question is purely arbitrary. It's based on an individual's personal beliefs on when potential is overruled by actual. But every stage from the point of conception is a calculus between potential and actual. The potential is much greater the younger that the person is, and even after birth. Through the course of childhood, puberty, and adolescence, we're dealing with different levels of potential and actual. An adolescent is still not fully matured yet, although they are much closer than a toddler is. But we're still dealing with levels of potential versus actual. So in keeping with this, it's difficult to separate abortion from the concept of murder and infanticide because it is only separated by a period of time. We're not talking about difference in total genetic structure. If that were the case, and we could equivocate destruction of part of the genetic system with murder, then we could make a case against masturbation and things like that. I'm not going to argue that case right now. But just speaking in terms of abortion and infanticide, the distinction is only in terms of degrees of aggravation. It takes a lot more balls and a good deal more ruthlessness to take an infant and smash its brains out with a blunt object than it does to just pay a doctor to rip the thing apart while it's still inside. You never actually see the thing living or breathing. It's kind of the same concept as lethal injection execution versus public beheading. One looks a lot nastier than the other, but the final outcome is pretty much the same. This kind of intellectual discourse into this particular issue does not occur at all in TJ's random ramblings. But two people in particular that responded to him, both of whom are pro-choice and both of whom are atheists, or one classifies himself as an independent Satanist, a non-theistic Satanist. They argue the case in differing respects from a much more intellectually curious standpoint. They delve into issues of potential and actual, and they draw the line at very different points from where I do. But they still draw a line somewhere before the point of birth. So in essence, the level and the degrees of their pro-choice views contain a certain limitation based on the aggravation of the act in question. And in their videos, they go into detail about why they think the way they do. There's no inquiry. There's no real dialectic involved in TJ's videos. TJ is not interested in parsing his own thoughts and thinking outside of the box. He has constructed a box for himself, and he's simply going to talk at the rest of us until we get it through our thick heads that he's the smartest person in the world. That's why I don't watch his videos anymore. Why would you want to watch something like that? And I argue with his subscribers on a regular basis because they're always filtering in and out of my videos for some reason. I don't know if he's sending them to me or if they're just getting here by accident, but they're finding their way on here. And they tell me that what he does is just comedy. And I'm telling them, no, it's not, because it's not funny. I mean, you might think stupid and asshole and screaming at the top of your lungs like a stuck pig is funny. I don't. There's got to be a punchline. And when I see a fat guy with a tiny head that's not Chris Farley on a video, I don't automatically think, ha ha. I think this is sad, this guy needs to lose some weight. That's what I think. And in terms of the argument that I get also that it's a middle ground between comedy and seriousness, let me just tell all of you something right now. As somebody who is a big fan of comedians that actually take this route, TJ is no George Carlin. He doesn't have the timing. The only way that it works to any level to that in that direction is when he cuts and splices his words. George Carlin never edited his stand-ups. George Carlin was very thought-provoking. And George Carlin was very funny, even when he was talking about issues that I was dead set in disagreement with him on. And George Carlin had personality. He wasn't a whiny little baby. He was a deep-thinking, sarcastic genius. TJ is not Sam Kinison. Sam Kinison had some extra weight on, but he carried it a heck of a lot better. Sam Kinison didn't just scream at random to fill up time while he was on stage. There was a reason for it. There was timing involved. And Sam Kinison wasn't an idiot either. Some people might think otherwise, but he wasn't. He was vulgar. He was definitely offensive. But there was always a point to what he was doing. And this is a big one. TJ is no Bill Hicks. I don't know how the heck anybody who has ever seen one of his stand-ups can make that equivocation. Yeah, TJ makes fun of the government for putting out all these idiotic, anti-smoking pictures on cigarettes, the Surgeon General and all that crap. So what? The guy's not funny, and he's not thought-provoking. Anyway, if you really want to understand what Ron Paul believes, if you're actually somebody who subscribes to Federalist Films or TJ or one of these other guys, and you really want to know why it is that people like me and people as different as Eagle Eye and some of the other people subscribe to me or who I'm subscribed to who are not Christians support Ron Paul, you want to know why we support him? I suggest you do some intellectually curious research. I suggest you pick up one of his books. There's plenty of used copies floating around out there, and I suggest you read what he actually believes in his own words. Cut out the second party crap. It's not going to get you anywhere. If you want to know what Ron Paul believes, the best way to do it is ask him, and people have, and there is video of it. You don't even need to really leave YouTube to get a good education on what Ron Paul believes. You just have to unplug your head from the template that these other people have put into your mindset and think for yourself. And you might come away from it saying, you know something, I'm not voting for Ron Paul because I don't agree with him. I think abortion is too important of an issue. I need to be legally allowed to kill my babies. That might be the conclusion that you come to. But do it yourself, for crying out loud. Don't just look to some tubby little man as a crutch to lean on whenever you have to engage in critical thought. Anyway, this is just another long rant. Frankly, I salute everybody who was able to sit through it. This is not a response to TJ or to Federalist Films, though they are definitely the primary subject of it. It will not be put in as a video response to either of them. Anybody who wants to hear this from their camp will have to stumble upon this video, and they'll probably be able to do it through the tags. So until next time, with prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.